happened with that approach under Obamacare. Costs have gone up. Employers are beginning to shed the plans. People will not be able to have the health care they have. That's why we've spent the time we have on this bill, and I yield back.
Well, the gentleman knows full well that I think you have wasted a lot of time on this House floor, wasted a lot of effort on this House floor, knowing full well that that had no chance of passage and that you were simply appealing to the base that you are just appealing to. In fact, this gentleman believes that what you would do if your bills passed, you would take away benefits from millions and millions and millions of people. And I think that's incontestable. It's incontestable that seniors who are now getting more help with the donut hole for their prescription drugs, which enhance their quality and length of life, would lose it if we repealed the Affordable Care Act. It is incontrovertible, I will tell my friend, that millions of young people who can't find a job, unfortunately, in this economy, and we haven't gotten any immediate jobs legislation that was offered by the President on this floor to even consider, pass or fail. Millions of young people would lose their insurance. Millions of children who have a pre-existing condition who now, under the Affordable Care Act, cannot be precluded by the insurance companies, was really who you want to put in, not you personally, but who the defeat of the Affordable Care Act would put insurance companies back in charge, not government bureaucrats, but insurance companies. So many of your Republican governors don't want to set up the exchanges. All the exchanges are is setting up a free market of private sector insurers where people can make a judgment, do they like policy A, B, or C. It's very tough for consumers to determine right now whether they're getting a good bargain for the price they're paying for their health insurance, which is very expensive. And I will tell the gentleman that the Affordable Care Act will also create, CBO says, economists say, millions of jobs in the health care area. So contrary to the gentleman's assertion that we are taking away care, in fact, we are adding 30 million people to access to affordable quality health care. And as Mr. Romney said, we are requiring responsibility. So everybody takes personal responsibility to make sure that if they can, they will insure themselves. So what? So that the rest of us won't have to pay when they go to the hospital or get sick. They will be responsible for themselves. And if they need help, as Mr. Romney said in Massachusetts, when Romney Care was adopted, a model just like we've adopted for the nation, it's important to make sure that they get some help. That's what that bill does. And in addition to that, we've made sure that people didn't have a serious illness and have the insurance companies, not government bureaucrats, not the government, but insurance companies say, you're too sick, we're not going to cover you anymore. So I will tell my friend, he and I have a radically different view on what the consequences of this 31 votes that we've had, that the gentleman knew were not going to pass the Senate, knew the President wasn't going to sign, and knew you didn't have the votes to override. You're making a political point. I understand that. There are people who disagree with the Affordable Care Act. I understand that as well. But I frankly think that had we dealt with jobs legislation during that period of 80 hours, and considered the President's jobs bill, we would have millions of more people employed today in America right now. Now, let me just, so that there's no misunderstanding, so I don't neglect to respond to the gentleman's assertion, he's right. He and I agree. We need to cut government red tape. We need to speed approvals. We need to make sure that we do not impede by regulation the growth of our economy and the growth of jobs. I couldn't agree with him more. And I think we ought to deal with that on a bipartisan basis, and hopefully we will continue or perhaps start to do that, I might say, or continue to do that in some instances. The gentleman is correct. Now, let me ask you something, however, about the tax vote, because you also mentioned bringing taxes down. Or let me ask you something. Do you expect that vote to come the last week that we are in session before the August break? I yield to my friend.
I'd say to Madam Speaker, to the gentleman, can you repeat the question?
Yes. Do you expect the vote on taxes, which you have referred to occur the last week, which I believe is the 29th of July, the week of 29 July, to be on that week?
I respond to the gentleman, Madam Speaker, that yes, we have scheduled for that week a vote on a bill to extend the existing rates, and we will also be bringing up a bill. That extension will be for a year, and we'll also be bringing up a bill that will outline the principles for tax reform that I know the gentleman also has said we need to reform our tax code so that we can help make it fairer, more simple, and so that we can see the economy grow again. Those vehicles will be brought up that week. Yes, Madam Speaker.
I look forward to seeing the latter bill because the gentleman's correct. I think we do need to reform our tax system. We need to make it simpler. I would like to see us reduce preference items and bring rates down as the Bowles Simpson, Domenici Rivlin, Gang of Six, whoever you want to refer to, has suggested. I think that's a move in the proper direction. I also think we have to, however, frankly, make sure that we bring down the deficit and debt confronting this nation. And I think, as Bowles Simpson pointed out, you've got to do that in a balanced way. Let me ask you something on these packages that you say are coming that last week. There have not yet been hearings on the ramifications of either of those bills, as I understand it, in the Ways and Means Committee. Does the gentleman expect there to be hearings on those? And does the gentleman expect there to be a markup of either one of those bills in the Ways and Means Committee? And I yield to my friend.
Madam Speaker, I'd say to the gentleman, I think I disagree with the gentleman that there hasn't been hearings. I think for the last year and a half, Chairman Camp and his committee have been fast about looking at the tax code, talking about tax reform, divulging what it would mean for us to have an increased tax environment for this economy. We've been all about the economy and growth. And I'd say to the gentleman, he likes to say, why can't we do jobs bills? We have been doing jobs bills. He complains about the 30-some bills we've been doing relating to Obamacare. I would say we've done even more than that relating to jobs. And I would ask the gentleman to just remember where those bills sit right now. They're on the doorstep of the Senate, and the leader over there refuses to bring them up. And so, again, I'd say to the gentleman, we stand ready to work together so that we can produce results for the people that sent us here. And that is the purpose of bringing forward the bills that have been talked about, have been dissected in terms of the existing tax rates, where they may or may not go, how they affect growth in this economy. That's what we're doing. We've had multiple votes, multiple hearings on tax reform, on what the tax rates mean, and this vote will be very clear. If you want to stop the tax hike for all Americans at all income levels, you'll vote for the bill. If you want to engage in tax reform, if you feel the tax code is too complicated, it needs to be simplified, rates brought down, loopholes closed, you'll vote for the bill. It's that simple. I yield back.
When you say, I presume, as the gentleman said, we're talking about two different bills, are we not?
I'd say to the Speaker that is correct.
Okay. I thank the gentleman for that clarification. Let me say to the gentleman that when the gentleman says there have been hearings on tax reform, I think that's probably accurate. What there has not been, in my view, and in Mr. Levin, who's the ranking member of the committee's view, there's been no hearing on the ramifications of the bill which apparently is going to be brought to the floor, which simply extends all the Bush-era tax cuts. Ramifications to the deficit, ramifications to the debt, and indeed ramifications to the economy. I would say, with all due respect to my friend the Majority Leader, I don't believe there have been hearings on that issue. There have been issues on should we reform the tax code. The gentleman and I agree we should simplify. We should reform the tax code. We should make it more compatible with economic growth and, very frankly, for average individual Americans to who want to pay their taxes, like to pay as little as possible. All of us would like to do that, but want to support their country as well. So I don't really share the gentleman's view that there have been hearings on the ramifications of the bill that the gentleman says is going to bring to the floor. And that's what I asked. Now, let me ask you the other question, which was the second part of it. Is there going to be a markup of the bill which you're going to bring to the floor in terms of taxes? So, to clarify, so that members on both sides of the aisle will have an opportunity to offer amendments in committee, make observations in committee as to the ramifications of that action, and that members will have an opportunity to reflect on that bill.
You know, I would say
I yield to my friend.
Madam Speaker, I would say to the gentleman, this is a very simple and clear choice here. Given this economy, if one wants to raise taxes on all Americans, you vote against the bill. If you want to go and help folks through a more simple tax code and you want to look towards tax reform, you vote for the next bill. Straight up or down. There has been enough discussion, enough hearings in the Ways and Means Committee as well as the Budget Committee. These issues were central to our budget. Your members on the Budget Committee as well as ours had a full and open hearing on our budget document and a markup. We believe now's not the time to raise taxes on working people, small businesses, and large. The economy is anemic. We don't have enough job growth. Why do we want to take more of people's hard-earned money? That's why we're bringing this bill forward. This bill is straight up or down. Stop the tax hike or not. I yield back.
I take it the answer is no, there will not be a markup on a bill that will have extraordinary consequences to all Americans and possibly extraordinary consequences to the deficit and debt and to our economy. Is that, am I correct in interpreting your answer as no, there will not be a markup of this very important bill? You will bring it straight to the floor without committee consideration. Is that an accurate interpretation of what you said? I yield to the gentleman.
Thank you, gentleman. Madam Speaker, I think the gentleman has heard my response.
Well, I did hear the response, and apparently I accurately characterized it. I think that's a shame, Mr. Majority Leader. Mr. Boehner said that we were going to be an open house, that we were going to consider matters, and that everybody would have their opportunity to have their input. Usually, tax bills are brought to the floor not subject to amendment. You have just said, as I understand what you said, this bill, our way or the highway. You don't like the bill the way we brought it to the floor, you're out of luck. You don't have an option. You can't put any of your ideas into this bill. If that's the way you intend to consider this bill, Mr. Leader, I think that's unfortunate, and I yield to my friend.
Thank you, gentleman. Madam Speaker, the gentleman knows that his side of the aisle will have an opportunity to posit their position on taxes through the regular process of a motion to recommit. And as I had said publicly yesterday, when asked, are the Democrats in the House going to be able to offer the President's tax proposal? I said, absolutely they will. So we'll see. We'll see, Madam Speaker, if the gentleman decides to put forward the President's tax proposal calling for a tax hike on American small businesses. We'll see if that happens, Madam Speaker, but we'll see, and that'll be the week it'll happen. You're either for stopping tax hikes or you're not. I yield back.
My way or the highway. That's what you just said, Mr. Leader. I understand that concept. Very frankly, in my view, we have agreement. We have agreement on something that you won't bring to the floor, and it is that all middle-class working Americans will not get a tax hike, all of them. And everybody up to $250,000 of income will have no tax increase. But we have a big deficit and a big debt, and we need to pay our bills. We have a debt limit vote coming up at the end of this year. Very frankly, we took the country to the brink of default and very adversely affected our economy by undermining confidence. You talked a lot about confidence in the last campaign, Mr. Leader. I agreed with you. I think we need to instate confidence, not undermine confidence. But I will tell my friend that if you wanted to work together, as you've said on a number of occasions now, as for instance we did with the Export-Import Bank, the bills that you sent over there we didn't work together on. They were passed on a partisan vote for the most part, not all of them. And some votes were overwhelmingly bipartisan. And guess what happened? They became law. The President signed them. Export-Import Bank, the Jobs Bank that you were, not the Jobs Bank, the Jobs Bill that you promoted and which I voted for, you said you want to work together. Now, it's interesting when you say work together because what you say you're going to give us is a motion to recommit. And what you will instruct and what your whip will instruct is for all of your members, vote no. It is a purely procedural vote. And as you have for the last 18 months, your members will vote no on motions to recommit, notwithstanding the fact that they may agree with the substance. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Leader, we can have a vote that ought to pass with 435 votes. 435 votes. Everybody in this Congress says that we ought to not have a tax increase on working Americans. On working Americans making less than $250,000 in taxable income. As you know, that's more income. But we won't get that vote, except on an MTR, which you have instructed your members, vote no. It's a procedural vote only. It's not a substantive vote. I would say to my friend, not only will you not do that on the floor, allow us an amendment on the floor, it appears, but you won't allow an amendment to be offered in committee so that we can vote on that. Yes, we have disagreement, but you're prepared to hold hostage working Americans by saying if the richest people in America might have a little bit of a tax increase, then everybody else is going to get a tax increase. You said it a different way, I understand it. But the reality and the ramifications of the actions that you are proposing to follow will mean that we will not get a vote, which I think there's overwhelming support of, in making sure that working Americans, and yes, 97% of small businesses, don't get any tax increase at all. We have agreement on that, Mr. Leader. Why don't we bring that to the floor and show the American public that, yes, we can come together, as you have suggested, yes, we can agree, and yes, we can make sure they don't get a tax increase. And then, yes, we can have a debate on the balance. And you will take one position, I may take another position, and the American public will see that, and then they can make a judgment on with whom they agree. Now, my view is an overwhelming majority of the public will agree with me, and you will think the overwhelming majority of the American public will agree with you. That's what democracy is about. Let us have this debate. Let us have this vote. Let us make sure that working Americans aren't held hostage to the wealthiest in our country. I yield if the gentleman wants to respond.
I thank the gentleman. And, Madam Speaker, what I'd say to the gentleman is holding hostage working families is denying them a job. It's about jobs. And, you know, the gentleman can play with the statistics all he wants and claim that 97% of the small businesses will get a tax break this way, and let's leave the others for later. But the significant fact is it's the others is where the significant job growth can be. Why would we want to go and tax job creators? We know that 50% of the people that will get a tax hike under the President's proposal get at least a quarter of their income from small business. And the more their income, the more the percentage. That means the jobs. So why would we want to stop job creators from hiring people because Washington takes more of their money? Why would we want tax rates to go up on anybody in this anemic economy? And why would we want to go and raise taxes when we haven't put an end to the out-of-control spending in Washington? Because what you're doing is digging the hole deeper. That's our position, Madam Speaker. And so I would ask the gentleman straight up, is the gentleman going to bring to the floor a motion to recommit for his proposal, the President's proposal? Is that going to be the motion to recommit? Will the gentleman actually put his words to work and have that be their motion to recommit? I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. If the gentleman has asked me, am I for the President's proposal, the answer is absolutely yes. I don't want the gentleman confused in any way. And if the motion to recommit is the only option we have available, we are certainly going to discuss that option. But we're not going to pretend, either to ourselves or to the American people, that's a real vote. You want to put it on the floor as an amendment? You want to have a real debate on it, not 5 minutes on one side and 5 minutes on the other side, which the motion to recommit is limited to. You're shutting us down, you're gagging us, and you're putting middle-class taxpayers at risk. Because you know, I know, and the American people know, the President of the United States has said he will veto your bill. He has said he'll sign a bill that together we could pass, making sure that 98% of Americans do not get a tax increase. But what you are proposing to do, Mr. Leader, is to bring to the floor a bill which simply protects the 2%. Say the 2% they should not pay more. And the gentleman says oh, they're great job creators. I understand what the gentleman's saying, but by the way, the program you're going to offer, it was in place. It was in place from 2001, 2003 to 2009. And you and I both know what happened is, not solely because it was in place, of course. Let us stipulate to that. Yeah. But the fact is, we had the deepest recession in your lifetime and my lifetime and the lifetime of anybody who's younger than 90 years of age under the program that you're proposing we continue with. I will tell you, Mr. Leader, I don't think that's a great way to proceed. At least we ought to have the opportunity to debate it. At least we ought to have more than 5 minutes on our side to tell the American people where we're coming. At least we ought to have a vote where you don't instruct your members. It's a procedural vote. Don't vote for it. And I will tell the gentleman with all clarity that the consequences of your act, and you do it knowledgeably, will be that middle-class taxpayers will be put at risk. Why? Whether you agree with it or not, the President will veto it. The Senate, I don't think, will pass it. And the fact of the matter is, we can do for 98% of America that which we agree on. You don't want them to have a tax increase? I don't want them to have a tax increase. We agree on that. And Americans cannot understand, when we agree on that, why we can't at least pass something on which we agree, which will help 98% of America in this struggling economy, as you clearly point out. Now, you point out that you didn't use the term, we only had 80,000 jobs last month. I was disappointed by that. That was unfortunate. But in the last month of the previous administration, we lost 818,000 jobs in 1 month with your program in place. That's a 890,000, almost 900,000 turnaround. From 818,000 minus to 80,000 plus. We created 4.4 million jobs in the last 28 months. Not enough. Not enough, by far. And I want to work with the gentleman to create many more. Work with him on jobs legislation, economic growth legislation. Make it in America legislation. If we could get some of that legislation to the floor, we think it would be helpful. So I say to my friend that I feel very strongly, as you can tell, that if we're going to have this vote, which is an extraordinarily consequential vote, at least we ought to have a substitute. At least. Not just an MTR, not just a procedural vote, not just a 5-minute debate on our side, 5-minute debate on your side. Don't you think Americans expect more of us in terms of a very substantive debate on the floor of this House, not in a political forum, but in a legislative policy forum? And I would urge the gentleman to consider that objective. Gentleman have anything further he wants to? I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 10 a.m. tomorrow, and further, when the House adjourns on that day, it adjourn to meet at noon on Tuesday, July 17, 2012, for morning hour debate, and 2 p.m. for legislative business.
Without objection. The Chair lays before the House the following personal requests.
Leaves of absence requested for Mr. Coble of North Carolina for today, Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas for today, and Mr. Rush of Illinois for today.
Without objection, the requests are granted. The Chair will entertain 1-minute request. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise? Without objection.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise today to draw attention to how campaign super PACs are contributing unlimited campaign spending, which shifts enormous political power to the super wealthy. Ruled by the few plutocrats truly threaten our republic and greatly harm representative government. Here's a great cartoon. It was in the Toledo Blade by Paul Kirk. Shows how the super PACs really have a stranglehold on the politics of this country. With the Citizens United ruling by the Supreme Court, they threw away decades of legal precedent governing campaign contributions, and the result has been a growing stranglehold by the money barons on good government and our political process. The American people know it, and they know we're not doing anything about it. At a minimum, we should demand greater transparency of who's actually giving this money, no more hidden donors, and I urge my colleagues to sign the discharge petition 4010 that's here on the floor today to move a bill for disclosure to the floor. But what we really should do is pass a constitutional amendment to allow for campaign spending and contribution limits. And I have that bill, and I've had that bill Congress after Congress after Congress, Resolution 8. I encourage my colleagues to join me as a co-sponsor. Let's do what Canada and Britain have done, and that's rule in the control of the many by the few money barons. I yield back my remaining time.
Are there further requests for 1 minute? Gentleman, without objection.
Madam Speaker, today we learned that American athletes competing in the Olympics will wear uniforms made in China. That not only hurts our pride, it hurts our economy. Madam Speaker, Made in America is not just a label, it is an economic solution. Today there are 600,000 vacant manufacturing jobs in this country, and the Olympic Committee is outsourcing the manufacturing of uniforms to China. That is not just outrageous, it's just plain dumb. It is self-defeating. Madam Speaker, I understand and my constituents understand the hard work, the skills, and the dedication of athletes competing in the Olympics. I think the Olympic Committee has to understand the hard work, the dedication, and the skills of America's apparel manufacturers, designers, and small businesses. And that's why today I'm calling on the Olympic Committee to reverse this decision and make sure that American athletes competing in the Olympics are competing with labels that say Made in America. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Are there further 1 minute requests? Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gomert, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Mark Halperin is an author who was educated at Harvard, Oxford, Princeton, Columbia, having also served in the British Merchant Navy and the Israeli military. I will simply convey his words from an article first printed in Hillsdale College's imprimis. 3 years before 9/11 propelled us into the realization that we had been at war for over 20 years, but only the other side knew it was a war. And also before we knew how crushing and debilitating our enormous debt would be and has become. I've shortened the words a bit and provide them here as they express my heart more exquisitely than my own written words could. When letters took a month by sea and the records of the United States government could be moved in a single wagon pulled by 2 horses, we had great statesmanship. We had men of integrity and genius. Washington, Hamilton, Franklin, Jefferson, Adams, Madison, Monroe. These were men who were in love with principle as if it were an art, which in their practice they made it. They studied empires that had fallen for the sake of doing what was right in a small country that had barely risen, and were able to see things so clearly that they surpassed in greatness each and every one of the classical models that they had approached in awe. Now lost in the sins and complexity of a Xanadu, when we desperately need their high qualities of thought, their patience of deliberation, and their unerring sense of balance, we have only what we have, which is a political class that in the main has abandoned the essential qualities of statesmanship with the excuse that these are inappropriate to our age. They're wrong. Not only do they fail to honor the principles of statesmanship, they fail to recognize them, having failed to learn them, having failed to want to learn them. In the main, they are in it for themselves. Were they not, they would have a higher rate of attrition, falling with the colors of what they believe rather than always landing on their feet, adroitly, but in dishonor. In light of their vows and responsibilities, this constitutes not merely a failure but a betrayal. And it is a betrayal not only of statesmanship and principle, but of country and kin. Why is that? It is because things matter. Even though it be played like a game by men who excel at making it a game, our life in this country, our history in this country, the sacrifices that have been made for this country, the lives that have been given for this country are not a game. My life is not a game. My children's lives are not a game. My parents' lives were not a game. Your life is not a game. Yes, it's true. We do have accumulated great stores of power, of wealth, and of decency against which those who pretend to lead us can draw when, as a result of their vanities and ineptitudes, they waste and expend the gifts of previous generations. The margin of error bequeathed to them allows them to present their failures as successes. They say, as we are still standing and a chicken is in the pot, what does it matter if I break the links between action and consequence, work and reward, crime and punishment, merit and advancement? I myself cannot imagine a military threat and never could, so what does it matter if I weld shut the silo hatches on our ballistic missile submarines? What does it matter if I weld shut my eyes to weapons of mass destruction in the hands of lunatics who are building long-range missiles? Our jurisprudence is the envy of the world, so what does it matter if now and then I perjure myself a little? What is an oath? What is a pledge? What is a sacred trust? Are not these the things, the province of the kinds of people who were foolish enough to do without all of their lives, to wear ruts in the Oregon Trail, to brave the seas, to die on the beaches of Normandy and Iwo Jima, and on the battlefields of Shiloh and Antietam for me, so that I can draw from America's great accounts and look good and be presidential and have fun in all kinds of ways. That is what they say. If not in words, then indelibly in actions. They who, in robbing Peter to pay Paul, present themselves as payers and forget that they are also robbers. They who, with studied compassion, minister to some of us at the expense of others. They who make goodness and charity a public profession, depending on their election for a well-mannered embrace of these things and the power to move them, not from within themselves or by their own sacrifices, but by compulsion from others. They who, knowing very little or next to nothing, take pride in eagerly telling everyone else what to do. They who believe absolutely in the recitation of pieties, not because they believe in the pieties, but because they believe in themselves. Nearly 400 years of America's hard-earned accounts, the principles we established, the battles we fought, the morals we upheld for century after century, our very humility before God now flow promiscuously through our hands like blood onto sand. squandered and laid waste by a generation that imagines history to have been but a prelude for what it would accomplish. More than a pity, more than a shame, it is despicable. And yet this parlous condition, this agony of weak men, this betrayal and this disgusting show are not the end of things. Principles are eternal. They stem not from our resolution or lack of it, but from elsewhere, where, in patient and infinite ranks, they simply wait to be called. They can be read in history. They'll arise as if of their own accord when, in the face of danger, natural courage comes into play and honor and defiance are born. Things such as courage and honor are the mortal equivalent of certain laws written throughout the universe. The rules of symmetry and proportion, the laws of physics, the perfection of mathematics, human will, that not only natural law, but our own best aspirations have a life of their own. They have lasted through far greater abuse than abuses them now. They can be neglected, but they cannot be lost. They can be thrown down, but they cannot be broken. Each of them is different expression of a single quality from which each arises in its hour of need. Some come to the fore as others stay back, and then, with changing circumstance, those that have gone unnoticed rise to the occasion. Rise to the occasion. The principle itself suggests from a phrase, and such principles suggest easily and flow generously. You can grab them out of the air from phrases, from memories, from images. A statesman must rise to the occasion. Democrats can do this. Harry Truman had the discipline of plowing a straight row 10, 12, 14 hours a day, of rising and retiring with the sun, of struggling with temperamental machinery, of suffering heat and cold and one injury after another. After a short time on a farm, presumptions about ruling others tend to vanish. It is as if you're pulled to the earth and held there. The man who works the land is hard put to think that he would direct armies and nations. Truman understood the grave responsibility of being President of the United States, and that it was a task too great for him or anyone else to accomplish without doing a great deal of injury, if not to some, then to others. He understood, therefore, that he had to transcend himself. There would be little enjoyment of the job because he had to be always aware of the enormous consequences of everything he did. Contrast this with the unspeakably vulgar pleasure in the office of President Clinton. Truman, absolutely certain that the mantle he assumed was far greater than he could ever be, was continually and deliberately aware of the weight of history, the accomplishments of his predecessors, and by humble and imaginative projection, his own inadequacy. The sobriety and care that derived from this allowed him a rare privilege for modern presidents: to give to the presidency more than he took from it. It is not possible to occupy the Oval Office without arrogantly looting its assets or nobly adding to them. May God bless the president who adds to them, and may God condemn the president who loots them. America would never have come out of the Civil War as it did had it not been led by Lincoln and Lee. The battles raged for 5 years, but for 100 years in the country, both North and South, modeled itself on their own character. They exemplified most perfectly Churchill's statement Public men charged with the conduct of the war should live in the continual stress of soul. The continual stress of soul is necessary as well in peacetime, because for every good deed in public life, there is a counterbalance. Benefits are given only after taxes are taken. That is part of governance. The statesman who represents the whole nation sees in the equilibrium for which he strives a continual tension between victory and defeat. If he did not understand this, he would have no stress of soul. He would merely be happy about money showered on the orphan, taken from the widow, about children sent to daycare so that they may be long absent from their parents, about merciful parole of criminals who kill again. Whereas a statesman knows continual stress of soul, a politician is happy, for he knows not what he does. It's difficult for individuals or nations to recognize that war and peace alternate, but they do. No matter how long peace may last, it will end in war. Though most people cannot believe at this moment that the United States of America will ever actually fight for its survival. But history guarantees that it will. And when it does, most people will not know what to do. They will believe of war as they did of peace, that it's everlasting. The statesman who is different from everyone else will, in the midst of common despair, see the end of war. Just as during the peace, he was alive to the inevitability of war and saw it coming in the far distance, as if it were gray, moving quietly across a dark sea. Now the politician will revel with his people and enjoy their enjoyments. The statesman, in continual stress of soul, will think of destruction. As others move in the light, he will move in the darkness. So that others move in darkness, he may move in the light. This tenacity that is given to those of long and insistent vision is what saves nations. A statesman must have a temperament that is suited for the Medal of Honor, in a soul that is unafraid to die. Electorates rightly favor those who have endured combat, not as a matter of reward for service, as is commonly believed, but because the willingness of the soldier to give his life is a strong sign of correct priorities, and that in the future he will truly understand that statesmen are not rulers but are servants. It seems clear, even in these years of squalid degradation, that having risked death for the sake of honor is better than having risked dishonor for the sake of life. No matter what you're told by the sophisticated classes that see virtue in every form of corruption and corruption in every form of virtue, I think you know as I that the American people hunger for acts of integrity and courage. The American people hunger for a statesman magnetized by the truth, unwilling to give up his good name, uninterested in calculation, only for the sake of victory, unable to put his interests before those of the nation. What this means in practical terms is no focus groups, no polls, no triangulation, no evasion, no broken promises, and no lies. These are the tools of the chameleon. They are employed to cheat the American people of honest answers to direct questions. If the average politician, for fear that he may lose something, is incapable of even a genuine yes or no, how is he supposed to rise to the great occasions of state? How is he supposed to face a destructive and implacable enemy? How is he supposed to understand the rightful destiny of his country and lead it there? At the coronation of an English monarch, he is given a sword. Elizabeth II took it last, and as she held it before the altar, she heard these words: "Receive this kingly sword, brought now from the altar of God and delivered to you by us, the bishops and servants of God, though unworthy. With this sword do justice, stop the growth of iniquity, protect the holy church of God, help and defend widows and orphans, restore the things that are gone to decay, maintain the things that are restored, punish and reform what is amiss, and confirm what is in good order, that doing these things may be glorious in all virtue, and so faithfully serve the Lord." Would that we in America come once again to understand that statesmanship is not the appetite for power, but because things matter, a holy calling of self-abnegation and self-sacrifice. We've made it something else. Nonetheless, after and despite its betrayal, statesmanship remains the manifestation in political terms of beauty and balance and truth. It is the courage to tell the truth and thus discern what is ahead. It is a mastery of symmetry of forces illuminated by the genius of speaking to the heart of things. Statesmanship is a quality that, though it may be betrayed, is always ready to be taken up again merely by honest subscription to its great themes. Have confidence that, even in idleness, its strengths are growing, for it is a providential gift given to us in times of need. Evidently, we do not need it now, but as the world is forever interesting, the time will surely come when we do. And then, so help me God, I believe, solely by the grace of God, the corrupt will be thrown down and the virtuous will rise up. Slavery was an abomination, but statesmanship arose, and statesmen fought until its demise. But 13 years after the foregoing words were said, we do so desperately need that statesmanship and God's unmitigated grace. We need His providential gift of this nation to us to endure so that additional generations will so enjoy it. And in the process, may God resume blessing these United States of America. I yield back.
Gentlemen have a motion.
I move that we do now hereby adjourn.
Question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned.